Hey everybody, it's Fireman, and today I'm going to be talking about the topic of fractional reserve banking and why it is completely fraudulent. And this is an important topic because if you have a bank account, then this means that the bank that you're using practices fractional reserves or practices fractional reserve banking, and so you're being defrauded right now even though you don't really know it. So I thought this was just sort of pertinent to go over the basics of fractional reserve banking and how and why exactly it's fraudulent. One of the most important things you need to understand about fractional reserve banking is that under all fractional reserve banking systems, the money that you deposit at a bank is no longer yours. Okay, when you deposit money at a bank, and I'm talking specifically about in the United States, but anywhere that uses fractional reserve banking, this is an absolute necessity, otherwise the system falls apart. But the money that you deposit at a bank, it is a loan. Okay, so you are loaning your money to the bank. It's not like you're giving the money to the bank to hold on to and keep secure for yourself. It is a loan. The reason why this is important is because if the money that you give to a bank is a loan, that means if the bank starts losing money, they have the legal right to use your loan, your deposit, in order to cover their losses. And this becomes even more important if you understand exactly what fractional reserve banking is. So let's say you have $100 and you're depositing it at a bank, and in America the reserve ratio is 10%. So that means that the bank only has to keep 10 of the dollars that you deposited for you. So every $100 you put into the bank only keeps 10 for you, then it uses the rest of the 90 for itself, and it loans out this money, and it will loan this money out again. So then this means the $90 that was yours, and that the bank still shows you having $100 on deposit, even though they've only kept $10 for you. This other $90 they loan out to somebody else. So that means this $90 goes on somebody else's account, and then that person with that $90 will come back, bring their money to the bank, and again the bank just restarts the process. And so with this $90 brought into them, they only keep 10%, which is now $9, and they loan out the rest. And so through this process, a bank can actually increase the total money supply by 10 times. So if you, with your initial $100, it'll end up being $1,000 that the bank has on different people's deposit balances, even though they only have $100 in the bank. So at any time, like, there's no functional way for a fractional reserve bank to go out of business without defrauding its customers. It is literally mathematically impossible. I'm not saying that it's just hard, but it is mathematically impossible for any fractional reserve bank to ever close its doors without defrauding its customers. So if your bank goes out of business, the only way for them to actually pay you back the money that they owe you is for them to get bought by a bigger bank. However, there's a finite supply of banks in the world, so this can only happen so often. And once the supply of banks runs out, like happened during the Great Depression, you have a system-wide bank run, and everyone thinks they used to have money, but it turns out that the money doesn't exist. And so they go to the bank one day and they'll say, hey, I want my $100,000 back, and the bank will be like, well, sorry, we had a bunch of losses, so your money doesn't exist anymore. And again, this is only possible because the money you give to a bank, it is not called a bailment. It's called something like a motum or something like that. It's some Latin word, but it's a loan. It's a loan. You're loaning your money to the bank. You're not asking the bank to hold on to your money securely. You're loaning it. Now, this still doesn't quite explain exactly how fractional reserves are fraudulent, because even if you're loaning your money to the bank, if the customer knows about it, what's wrong with that? How is that fraudulent? You know, there are people who use fractional reserve banks that understand what it is. Most people don't, so that beginning intro was just to show you what fractional reserve banking is. However, the system is fraudulent because cash that you hold outside of the bank is not equal to money that you hold inside of a bank vault. However, the banking system treats both goods, both cash outside of the banking system and money in the banking system, as the same good. However, as I'm going to explain to you, cash and money in a banking system, they're not the same good, so they should have freely independent prices. And by that I mean the price of cash should not be equivalent to the price of money in a bank. And that might sound weird to you, and that's just because of the sort of linguistic tricks that banks use to try and cover over this fraud. And I'm not saying it's something that every bank or everyone who works at a bank understands. If you go talk to your average bank worker, your bank teller, even higher ups at banks, they don't understand fractional reserve banking, and it really confuses them. But which should be sort of an indication of a problem with the banking system itself. However, let's go into a little bit more detail on why cash is not equivalent to money held in a bank vault. And the way we explain this is by talking about what specifically defines a good. So what specifically defines a good is the satisfactions you can get from it, and that's kind of a really broad and vague term, so you're not really going to understand what I'm saying when I mean that, or when I say that, but a good way to illustrate this, a good example of this, is to talk about Aladdin's lamp versus any old regular golden lamp. You might have two lamps that look the exact same. One is Aladdin's lamp, one is not Aladdin's lamp. But Aladdin's lamp, if you rub it, you can grant 3 wishes. So the good itself is not defined by its molecular structure. You could have a lamp that is molecularly identical to Aladdin's lamp, but that doesn't mean that they're the same because they offer different satisfactions. Obviously, if you have Aladdin's lamp, that is worth far more than an identical looking lamp that doesn't allow you to or doesn't grant you 3 wishes. So like, let's say you had Aladdin's lamp and you gave it to a bank, and then as soon as you give it to the bank will only give you back just a regular gold lamp that looks identical. It's completely identical except for the fact that you cannot be granted 3 wishes. Obviously, if they tried to give you back a lamp that was not Aladdin's, then you would be screaming your head off and you'd be like, look, you guys stole from me, and you would easily win that in court. However, for some reason, when it comes to money, they do the exact same thing, but they do not, or the legal system is designed so that you cannot win this court case, and it is also designed, or the linguistic nature of the banking system is designed to obfuscate this fraud that goes on. So let's talk about cash versus money in the bank. So like I said, mathematically speaking, a bank run over the long run is there's a 100% chance of a bank run at some point in time. You can't ever say exactly when it will happen, but there's a 100% chance of a bank run over a long period of time. So that means that all the money in the bank, it functions like normal money, except in the case of a bank run. So just like Aladdin's lamp, all you get is 3 wishes. That's, it's something that can be done real quick, but that still separates the Aladdin's lamp from any lamp that looks identical that doesn't give you the same number of wishes. Cash in a bank vault, or not cash in a bank vault, but money in a bank, so just money that's on your bank account, it operates as money most of the time, except for in the scenario of a bank run when it gives you absolutely nothing. So if you have money in a bank vault during a bank run, it literally just disappears. It's not there anymore. You can't use that money even though the money shows up on your bank account. However, cash that you hold, if you're actually holding on to the dollar bills, you will always be able to spend that no matter what. So again, just like Aladdin's lamp is very close to just an identical gold lamp, except that the gold lamp obviously doesn't grant you wishes, which is really 3 wishes. It's not that much, but it's a huge difference in terms of defining it as a good. So if you think that Aladdin's lamp would not be equal to another gold lamp, then obviously you have to say the same thing about cash as opposed to money held in a bank, because cash is always spendable. You can always spend cash, but money in a bank, you can only usually spend that except in the case of a bank run. So it is not currently, but it should be illegal for you to define cash as equivalent to money in a bank, because money in a bank does not offer the same properties that cash does. Cash can be spent at any time, no matter what. If you're holding on to cash, it doesn't matter if there's a bank run, because you still have that cash. It's still sitting in your hand. But the money in the bank, it just literally disappears in the event of a bank run. So legally speaking, the fact that cash is considered equivalent and is considered as the same good as money in a bank, that is the fraud of fractional reserves. It's not that fractional reserves themselves are in some way fraudulent. It's a pretty shady system, and it's something that if people understood, I don't think anyone would really use. However, you can have fractional reserves without it being fraudulent. You can't have a fractional reserve banking system without it being fraudulent, so long as the money in the bank is not considered as an equal good as cash. And so you might be wondering, how would that exactly work? How would you have a fractional reserve banking system where money in the bank is not considered equal to cash? Well, the answer is that their prices would be independent. So cash would have a different price to money in the bank. And because cash can be used at any time, whereas money in a fractional reserve bank cannot, that would mean cash should have a higher value than money in a bank. And so this is where sort of the linguistic tricks of fractional reserve banking come into play, because the cash should not be called the same thing as money in a bank. It's very confusing to call them the same thing, but like I said, because cash can be spent at any time but money in the bank cannot, they obviously are not the same thing. They are not the same good, and you never have two goods. You never legally use two separate goods as though they are the same good. The entire legal system of fractional reserve banks is based upon, it's called mutum, I think, but anyways, it's not a bailment. So a bailment at a bank would mean that they have to give you back the exact same dollar that you put in, but because it is not a bailment, they just have to give you an equivalent dollar. However, if the money in the bank is not equivalent to cash and you give them cash, then obviously they have defrauded you. So that is the fraud of fractional reserves. The fractional reserves is a very shady system, but if someone says the fractional reserve system itself is fraudulent, that's a lie. The fraud that goes on within fractional reserves is the fact that they treat cash as an equivalent good as money in the bank, and this is a complete lie. This is a complete fraud, and happens in every modern banking system in the Western world, and nobody really says anything about it. So I just wanted to throw this out there just in case any of you have bank accounts, which I would assume most of you do. It's something you should really understand, is that the banking system that you use is fraudulent, and nobody's doing anything about it, and nobody will do anything about it unless somebody tells you. So that's the purpose of this video, is just to tell you that fractional reserves are, one, it's a shady system that you give your money to a bank, and most people think that the bank has to hold on to that money and is required to give that money back. No, that is not true. When you give money to a bank, you are loaning that money to a bank, so that means if the bank screws up and makes a bunch of bad loans, they just say, whoops, sorry, we don't have your money. Tough luck. That's something that you should really understand. And then secondly, fractional reserves, by definition of what a loan is that when you loan somebody something, they have to give you not necessarily the exact same good back, but they have to give you, according to a mutum, they have to give you back an identical good at a later point in time. However, when you give cash to a bank, they do not give you an identical good when they put money in your bank account. Okay, money in a bank account is not equal to cash, and so that is a complete